Right, 2 seconds, I'm just playing a game. Let's have some fun then. Do we have anybody voice actors in the room?
Woo!
Yeah?
Right here.
Excellent, good. You don't want to miss this then. So this is the second time that we've run this panel, and it's great because every single time it's with a different group of people. They're going to be here to talk to you a little bit about voice acting. So, I would like to introduce to the stage Mr. Chris Spinney.
I know what you're thinking. Who's this dude? And why has David Wallace walked away? So, my name's Chris, and although Hello!
Who, by the way, killed it last night.
So, although I come to TF Nation as a fan of Transformers, I've also been a professional voice actor for about 18 years. And with this panel today, we thought that what might be interesting is while we have these awesome voice actors with us, every year, when the guys are on stage, we get questions from the audience most of the time, asking about how do I become a voice actor? What advice do you have to be a voice actor? And we thought it might be interesting to ask these guys about the actual job of being a voice actor, not just limited to their work in Transformers. So that's what we're going to do today, and hopefully you guys might find it interesting to kind of hear about what they do on a slightly broader scale. So, I wrote some questions down. So let's start at the beginning. And now you guys will have spoken about this, I'm sure, during your individual Q&As and panels over the weekend. But let's start by asking each of you, in a brief way, what was your path to becoming a voice actor? How did it start for you? Because obviously you guys are stage and screen actors as well. But how did voice acting come into your life? How did you get there? David, start with you, David.
Yeah. Go first? Okay. When I was very young, I had a fascination with radio when it was a thing. There was a cassette tape that still exists. I have it at home. My mother found it and sent it to me. My arm probably is in pretty rough shape by now, but I received a cassette recorder from a Christmas present, and I recorded everybody, including my dumb self. And I was mimicking the person on the radio. I would actually turn down the voice and turn it up when the music came on. And I remember recording it. The song was Delta Dawn. What's that flower? Was that Tony Orlando? Who was that? No.
No.
Helen Reddy. Delta Dawn. What's that flower?
Definitely.
And this is the day CKPT, the colleges were still in Canada at that time, and it was the worst colleges on the planet. And it was me mimicking being on the radio. And fast forward about 10 years after that, I was 17 years old in my hometown. I ended up getting a job doing overnights and the weekends on that very radio station. And I was horrible, but one person said, yes, and they gave me a shot. And that's when I met my wife in high school. I used to play requests for her. She was fast asleep, never heard them, but I would always play songs for her after midnight. I have nightmares to this day. You have radio nightmares. A dream I'm back in my hometown of Peterborough, Ontario, Canada, and it's cold and snowy outside, and I'm back doing the all-night show. I wake up like a cold sweat. Because it's fear of going back or something, whatever that means. But that's how I started. My career was in radio, and then fast forward, but yes, next.
Yes, mine is very different.
I grew up just picking up people's accents and wanting to like do accents all the time. So I had like a Scottish aunt, and so she'd always be like, "Oh, what are you doing? No!" Pick that up, and then we would come here a lot and try to emulate whatever I've heard along the way, and talk to myself all the time in accents, just constantly. And I actually just always talk to myself all the time. I'm the only child, so there's a lot of alone time. And I didn't realize other people didn't do that until like 2 weeks ago. When I was like, "So how did you get like an accent coach? Like, how do you do your accents?" And I was like, "No, I just talk to myself." And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, I don't know, I listen to things and then I talk to myself. And she was like, "All right." And she was like, "Okay, I don't do that, so I guess I gotta get an accent coach." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. I guess this is just a quirk that I got." So it started off that way. And then when I got into acting, I made like this video where I played like 11 different characters doing like 11 different accents almost. And when I got my representation, my managers and my agents, I was like, "All right, well, I can do all these different voices. I want a voiceover agent." And that's not something that they had thought of. And they're like, "All right, well, if that's what you want to do, go ahead." And so they set me up with an agent. I did like they had already seen that short film, and then they had me do a demo and then signed me. And then I got Ms. Marvel like 2 months after that. So it really just started with a lot of alone time.
I have a dozen and a half different origin stories, but I'm listening for the common denominator in what we're all saying, and I haven't talked about this one in a while. I think what we all have in common, and probably with a lot of people who are attracted to conventions and convention life, is that we're all kind of on some level outsiders, and we find ourselves with a lot of alone time, and we're just kind of put together differently. So for me, it's been theater and stage, first, last, and always, and I've always been voice-driven, even in playing when I was young, and everything was like character in my head, and why people sounded the way they sounded, and I would engage strangers in conversation on the bus to see if they sounded the way they looked in my head. Not profiling, but just, it was a fascination. Just what makes us us, what sort of triggers you in your brain, what turns you on. But I was doing a play. I was listening to commercials on the radio, and I thought, geez, how do people do that? And then I thought, well, advertising agencies go into studios and they make commercials. And if you heard my talk last night, I think in order to venture into this line of artistic work, or any line of artistic work, you kind of have to have equal parts of optimism and naivete and, frankly, stupidity to believe, that you're going to find a place for yourself in it. In a good way. I mean this in a good way. The best way. So I thought, well, I have to bring myself to the attention of advertising agencies. So I went to a yard sale, and I bought a Wallensack tape recorder, and I went to the newsstand, and I bought magazines and newspapers, and I cut out ads from the newspaper and magazines, and I got this rickety Wallensack, and it had a little tape microphone attached to it, and I had a phonograph with a real heavy stylus. You could hear the needle drops, and I had some classical music, and you could hear the needle dropping on the vinyl, and I was reading the magazine copy, and I made this tape, and it wasn't digital, it was a tape, and I drove myself to these advertising agencies in St. Louis. There were a fair amount of them, and I dropped off my tape. I thought, well, I'm going to do commercials. Stupid, wonderful me. And I got a call from this guy who I thanked for the rest of his life before he passed away. And he called me in. And so I thought, well, my career's made, here I go. And he said, hey, I heard your tape. We sat down for coffee. And he said, that is the worst voiceover tape I've ever heard in my entire life. He said, you can't let anyone else hear that, ever, ever, ever. He said, but you have an interesting voice, and I'd like to help you out. Well, you know, angel number one landed on my shoulder. He said, I do voice recording at Technosonic Studio. I've never heard of it. He said, and as a rule, I book more time than I need. Sit in the back of the room, see how real professional people do it. And if I have extra time, I'll throw you some coffee to stick you in the booth, and I'll give you something that won't embarrass you, and you can put together a demo that you can actually have people listen to. We're going to burn everything else you have, and make sure that you drive to the dump and have it picked up. We're going to wait together until it's picked up and destroyed. And that's how it started. And boom, I had somebody on my side. And until you have somebody on your side, it doesn't start. And that doesn't start until you're stupid enough, naive enough, optimistic enough, and idealistic enough to just sort of reach out there. Oh, if you heard my talk last night, there was one thing I forgot to say. I told you about my hair falling out, but I didn't tell you it grew back thicker than it ever was before. And I also need to have a caveat that it's not a strategy for growing thicker, fuller hair that I
So let's talk a little bit about the dreaded auditions. In my experience, I've auditioned for things before where the amount of information you get about a character can vary wildly. Like sometimes you'll get a lot of information about who this character is, you'll get pictures, you'll get, you know, a real sort of, idea of where you're going, and sometimes it's literally one line. It doesn't tell you very much at all about whatever it is you're trying to do. Do you guys have any kind of process in auditions? Like how do you approach, auditioning for a character based on how much information you get? So if you get a lot of information, that's fine, but if you don't get very much on a character, if you've ever had that, how do you go about working out what you're going to do in an audition?
What they don't give you, you're obliged to give yourself. The emphasis is not on voice, the emphasis is on acting. They're not looking for voices, they're looking for fully realized three-dimensional characters. So if you get one sentence, the rest of the page is up to you. You better figure out something you can sink your teeth into. And if you have to invent that for them, then you have to invent that for them. But it better be there in 3 dimensions, or you're going to get passed over because it'll have no substance.
Yeah, the truth of it is a big thing. You said dreaded audition. I don't know if I don't dread them at all. I love the opportunity or the challenge of an audition. And especially one that's during the radio and storytelling, as Greg said. For a few years, I used to do this, you gotta connect it, DK, connect it more. And so I started doing trailers. I didn't really quite understand what that meant. And to find that, it was more an exercise in finding out who I was. I eventually found out my read, because I do all these different voices, but I kept thinking, well, what's my read? What do I do? So it was very frustrating until one day I had a trailer came through for Richard Jewell, Clint Eastwood film for Warner Brothers, and so I don't know, Richard Jewell at PG-13 at Theaters Friday. I didn't do anything. I just whatever, and I sent it, and I quit. And 10 minutes later, it was about an hour or so later, Dave Clark calls my manager and says, hey, so they like you, Warner Brothers likes you for the Jewel movie. And I go, what? Really? I didn't do anything. He said, exactly. I go, oh, so there I am. That's me. So I understood about connecting. It's me. It's a human being, and it's a connection. It's your story, you know, and instead of just being a voice, you know, it's like, this is who I am. And that was the first time that, after all these years, I went, oh, right. And it's take the mask off. And now, I mean, I've started, you know, the trailers, it's just, that was my sort of moment. But yes, being a human being and connecting. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of all this, I think. I do feel dreaded audition when it comes to on-screen stuff. Because you've got to be off. Well, I mean, you don't have to be off book, but I try to be off book, and then we spend like hours getting off book, and then you do a whole audition tape, and then you're like, all right, this is amazing, and then you never hear from anybody. So that I actually am kind of usually annoyed by. but for the voice auditions, I get excited because, again, I'm talking to myself most of the time anyway. So might as well like record it, yeah, and get someone to like hire me. But yeah, it's the same thing. You have so much liberties with your imagination, and it either works and it's something that they want, or it doesn't. And you know, you do your best, and then you move on, and you have fun with it as much as you can.
Moving on is crucial. You do everything that's within your control, and then you send it off to this world that is outside of your control, and I dare you to control that world that's outside of your control. It's a heartbreaker, and the more you want it, the more it hurts when you don't get it. But it's outside your control. You affect everything that you can affect, and then it's out there. You know, other people are making decisions, and you just let it go.
The audition is your job. It's part of your job. You may not get paid for that, but it's your job. It's part of it all, you know. And once in a while, somebody says yes.
Boy, that feels good.
Yeah.
So we'll just move that question a bit further on, just because I'd like to hear just an individual idea about some of the characters you played. So I'd like to ask about the audition process for specific characters. So, for instance, Greg, Grimlock. Back in the day when he first came into your life, what was the audition process for Grimlock, and how did you find that character, and you know, how did that go?
This I touched on an individual panel the other day, but the breakdown, it was great because they depicted some situations he would find himself in, but it kept going back to these simple things. First thing it said was, big muscle. Then it said, small brain. Big muscle, small brain. Small brain. Me love Cubs war stories. Tell Grimlock about petrol rides. Big muscle, small brain. So he had these childlike qualities. He had this hinged jaw. For the first 4 episodes, I hinged my jaw. I made my muscle bigger. My brain smaller. So it was just gift on top of gift. But then I got a call from Wally Burr, the director, who said, I have good news and bad news. I said, tell me both at the same time. He said, Hasbro loves you. Sunbow loves you. And I was the new kid. I was younger than everybody. I was less experienced than everybody, which is why I'm still younger than everybody. Better looking than everybody. No, but he said, they think this is like a career-ending voice and a console-busting voice, and there's concern about whether you're a good auditioner or whether you can maintain and sustain this thing. I talked about this the other day as well. So I went to a voice coach who coaches heavy metal singers, and I learned there are vocal techniques for your vocal cords are kind of like a curtain, and I learned how to open the curtain rather than compress the curtain. If you do these things, your voice, you have a career for a week. But if you can do the same thing, thinking about opening the curtain rather than closing the curtain, then you're Bon Scott, and you have a heavy metal career for a lifetime instead of a week. Anyway, I found out what I needed to do to have a career instead of a gig for 5 minutes. And now I'm celebrating with all of you the 40th anniversary of the franchise.
Twitch. How did we arrive at Twitch? What was the process of creating that character when you went into audition?
So that happened during the pandemic. And so that was right after we all had to, we got messages from our agent saying, like, if you still want to work, you have to have an at-home studio. So then scrambled and put together the at-home studio, which is a microphone in a closet. My favorite room in the house, by the way, right now. I really love the closet. I really do. Every time I go in the closet, I'm like, this place is just so positive. I don't know why. So yeah, that one I, rolled out of bed and went into the closet.
As one does.
As one does. And, I didn't know what it was for. It was strictly confidential. It was called something else. I think it was called Hometown Heroes. And I think it was just like a spunky, I don't even know if I was told it was a robot. I don't quite recall what the description was, but I just know that I didn't know what it was. And, the words were written there, they were written very well, and the, character description was good enough for me to, get an idea of who this character was. And I booked it just off of the audition tape, and that it was pretty, and once I realized what it was for, once I booked it, I was like, oh my gosh, Transformers, and I get to be a brand new robot. I don't have to compete with anybody else or fill any big shoes of previous actors who did the role. So yeah, it was the most ideal situation.
So David, of course, we know that you're Megatron, we know that you're Optimus Prime. I'd like to hear about Clank. You guys know Ratchet and Clank? Yeah. What about Ratchet and Clank? Where did that voice come from? What was the audition process like that? How did you come up with what he sounds like?
Before that, I did get called back for Hometown Heroes for Optimus Prime. I can tell you that now.
Wow.
And I was disappointed. I said, yeah, that's business. You move on. It's like good or whatever. But I thought maybe there's no, but it was fun. So I would have been fun to work with you. During Marvel's, what were we doing together? Black
Panther's Quest.
Yes.
Avengers Assemble too,
Avengers Assemble. Yeah, Avengers Assemble, right?
Yeah.
You were Miss Marvel.
Marvel.
Yes.
You were
Vision, yes, Vision. Back to your thing. Clank was fun. Sorry, so Clank is interesting because it happened 25 years ago now. It's 25th anniversary coming up this November. It's like, wow. I was still commuting from Vancouver at that time. We had not was in the process of visas. And so I was on an airplane, sometimes weekly, mostly every 2 weeks, back to LA, back and forth. And this audition came in, and it was a paragraph. In Transformers franchise, we had a Bible of stuff. It was descriptions, relationships between characters, drawings, renderings, all of it. We had it all. And Clank was one paragraph. He's a robot, and we don't want him to sound like a robot. We don't have a personality. So I'm like, I don't know. So what happened? My process will differ from everybody else's. I start reading what they're looking for in just my own voice. And as soon as I hit a word, it said, he's a robot. So I start thinking about robots. And then I would change his voice and start doing this. And I'd end up doing it. Instead of saying can, I would say cannot. But Ratchet, I cannot go. And my head started doing this little shitty. And of course, when you do that on the audition, you have to do that in session. So I ended up having, neck issues. I'm not doing this because you could tell behind the glass. If I wasn't doing this, now it's not quite there, try that again. I started doing this Ratchet. There he is. I go, oh. great, so I have to do that. So I just came up with this voice who had a bit of a personality. In my mind, I wanted this robot to make you cry. I wanted to make you feel something when you listen to this robot. But imagine I'm your friend. You know, I wanted you to go, oh, no. You know, I wanted that. And that's what my goal was. And a little bit, you never know. You get something, you think, oh, this is going to last a week. 25 years later, another thing you go, oh, this is going to be like forever job. You know, and it's canceled after the first season. Just don't know. So that's how the clank thing happens.
So let's step aside from the vocal aspect of voiceover and in fact the acting aspect of voiceover for a second, because there's a lot more to it than just doing that. So the question I would ask is, what other skills or attributes do you need to be a voice actor, aside from the acting and the vocal part of it? What else goes into the job that you would need to actually succeed in the business?
Find an improvisation class in a university, in a community workshop. That pamphlet comes to your house. Any opportunity for improv will teach you to be spontaneous. It will teach you to react, which is the most important part of acting. It will teach you to listen. It'll teach you to be in the sandbox with the other people in the scene. It'll teach you to be flexible. It'll teach you not to be locked into reads. It'll teach you to be prepared but not overly prepared, rehearsed but not overly rehearsed. The way that animated product becomes animated is in the moment. The worst thing you can do is be slick. The worst thing you can do is not surprise yourself at the microphone. That's where the magic happens.
And another thing about voice acting, you mentioned, obviously, of course we know that you have a home studio set up, as I'm sure you, Greg, and Catherine, you have your microphone in the closet. What sort of, how much do you find that you need technical skills to be a voice actor, in terms of, you know, when you're behind the mic at home and whatnot? Do you need to have a sort of quite a big technical knowledge of equipment and all that kind of stuff, you know, to think the idea of actually working from home or working by yourself? How much do you rely on that?
Well, I've been using an engineer for years because I'm not technically proficient. And he comes once a month, George Whittam. George, he comes once a month. If there's anything wrong or I need upgraded, George comes. He's on speed dial. But I know technically what it's like being in front of the camera. You need to find your light. You need to know that. You need to find where the microphone is and how you need to. Those technical things are very, very important. How far you can yell and push. You need to have a mic that can take that and understand, like, you know, those sorts of things. But yeah, I fortunately need George because I'm going 24/7 now. With the trailers, with promo, and the commercials, and the cartoons, it's a whole different. I need someone. If something breaks, I'm kind of out, and George kind of takes care of that.
Right.
But it's just, yeah.
That is not the answer I expected David Kay to give. I was going to say, I'm a Nimrod. I know exactly how many buttons to push to get it to open and be broadcast, not broadcast ready, but audition perfect. Even if I have to spring for a studio, I want to do session in studio, because when they start yelling what needs to be tweaked and done, I don't want them to be pointing at me in my home studio. I'm audition proficient, but I'm not session proficient. I thought David was like because of his radio history, I thought he was.
No, I do. Everything I know how to tweak, and I know what they don't want. I take off, you know, compression. It's not. I know how to do all that. But if something is like software is not working, I'm out. If some button's like not working on the thing, I go, well, how do I fix that? Like yeah, all that stuff, I know what they want and what they need. You need to know, the compression issue and all that stuff, that needs to be ready to go.
Well, I was going to bow at your feet, but I'm going to save my knees.
I'm fairly proficient. I have like a very basic home studio setup. I have my microphone, I have my cloud lifter, I have, I do stuff through Source Connect. Once it's set up, it's pretty easy. I've gotten really good at like editing things down in Audacity and keeping track of my levels while I'm recording. Roger Craig Smith, another wonderful voice actor, he's the one that basically, like, when I found out I had to have my own studio, I was like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, okay, listen, this is what you need. And he, like, gave me the whole rundown. And then once I figured it out and I had the setup, I was like, okay, this is doable. I mean, I still prefer to go into the studio because I like to see people, but I feel fairly comfortable in there.
Yeah, I think COVID was something that for a lot of voice actors was a real trial by fire, because when you couldn't go to a studio anymore and you had to get a home setup if you didn't already have one, if you had no real technical knowledge, it was terrifying, because you had to suddenly learn like how to do that side of it as well as doing your job as a voice actor, and it was scary.
I was like, this is over. This is it. I'm not going to work this year. But no, once it got set up, it was
Because of COVID, there's an animation studio called Salami Studios in Los Angeles. Woo! They retooled one of their studios so that you're assigned a parking space next to a door. You go into that door. It puts you in a room at the microphone. There's safety glass between you and the other side of the studio where the rest of the employees are. You do your session. No, you're hermetically sealed. You go back out the door you came in. Your car is in the space next to that door, and you leave, and no one has exchanged oxygen or anything else in the entire procedure. Obviously, we're all survivors of that experience to date, and so bravo us and bravo that, but changes have been made. Aside from that, and it may be another of your questions, but just recording in general, I feel bad for a new generation of voice actors, voice artists, because it was standard practice when I came in for voice recording to be done ensemble style. Wally Burr and Hanna-Barbera had, I called it just octopus mic setups, so that everybody in the show sat in formation in a circle, and we're all mic'd. And, we're actors. We like to all be in the sandbox and play together. I think if it's fun and stupid like Garfield, it becomes more fun and more stupid. It's contagious. If it's galactic battle, it becomes more urgent and more dangerous and more contagiously urgent if we're all together. Now it's a miracle if you don't record isolated and alienated. Not just from home, but if you're in the studio, you have your part and your relationship is with your director. It's a whole lot more difficult to stay connected to the material. That's the gig. You have to become skilled in staying emotionally invested, even though you're not in the presence of the people you're in the scene with. It's just the way things are. But I wish it were otherwise.
So I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll find out if anybody out there would like to ask you something. But how has the voiceover industry changed over the years? I mean, in particular, Greg, you've been doing this job for a long time. How's the industry changed? What have you noticed about it that is much more prevalent these days than it was back then? And what are the challenges facing people who want to get into doing the job these days that may not have been there back then? How is the whole thing, how is it different nowadays that you may have noticed?
There was sort of a smaller group. When I was in Vancouver, my goal was to be involved in the group Greg Berger is here. I mean, I remember coming down to a convention, and I stood up in the audience and asked Rob Paulson a question, and my goal was to work one day with Rob, and here I'm sitting across him in Ben 10.
DK, can you believe this getting paid for this? It's unbelievable. I can't.
It was, dreams. It's just having a dream. But it's changed. I think there was a smaller, now, the technology, everyone can do it. So our job as professionals is to, when we do a read on something, it needs to be good enough to go to air. And it happens a lot now. They will just take your audition. Oh, by the way, good news, Nike booked you in the thing, and they're just going to use your audition. It has to be that level of good. I mean, I don't know, you have to, in your like Greg said, when you're not working with an ensemble, which I prefer to do, your imagination has to, you have to close you have to see everything. You're like Mozart or Beethoven, you have to see all the parts and do all the notes, and you have to put yourself in a situation, So there's a little more skill, but I really miss that. To me, again, COVID did a number. I was COVID ready in the early 90s. I had, because I was doing, radio and television identification and stuff. So I was already set up. But I prefer to be in the studio with these people because it's so much fun. That's the biggest change for me, I guess.
Yeah, bad coffee, good gossip, and then you go in the studio and
yes.
But Transformers, we spent hours and hours and hours together because they were writing on the fly. They were getting changes from Hasbro and Sunbow, and they were kind of endless writer meetings during sessions. But the result is we spent so much time bonding that I made genuine friendships for a lifetime. We became family to each other. Same with Garfield. That can't happen in this modern world. Sometimes you don't even know the people that you're in the show with unless you're at a convention together. This is the substitute for that. This is when we have an opportunity to spend quality time together.
Yeah, I didn't meet any of my Transformers co-stars in person until like a year and a half or 2 years after we started the group recording. It was at Comic-Con. And we did the group record on Zoom because, again, it was COVID. So we didn't even get to, I haven't even met everyone in person. I've only met like a few of the other actors.
I'm going to expand it to the same challenge of the modern world, and it's not gloom and doom. It's just, if the front door is locked, you got to try and get in the side door, or crawl through the attic, or crawl space. It just means new challenges. The same way in the retail world or the corporate world, it's rare that you get a chance to look somebody in the eye, shake their hand, and make an individual, unique fingerprint impression on someone. Everything is digital. How do you distinguish yourself? How do you make yourself unique and individual in a digital submission? Well, it's not impossible, but you got to find something that makes you unique and individual. And if you're quirky, make your submission quirky. Don't get lost in the mainstream crowd. If you digitally submit a digital demo and it's vanilla, it goes straight to the vanilla pile. If you have something, it doesn't matter what it is, that makes you you, that's going to jump out, even if it's weird, they're going to go, what was that? And then it's going to go to this pile. Something's going on there. I'm not even sure I understood what I just heard. But it wasn't like that. It was interesting. Same thing. It'll get further consideration. If you want to work in the chorus, by all means blend. Be like everybody else. But if you want to either not get the gig or get featured, then be strange, be different, be unique, be individual, and make yourself heard, make yourself seen, make yourself noticed. That's how it's done.
That's so true. I mean, this is the one industry I think that they don't want you to blend in. They They don't want you to blend. They want to know like what, and it takes a while to adjust to that because like so often in society you are trying to just sort of not stand out as much, and you know you do have to sort of blend in a little bit to I mean be accepted or for people to respect you. But in this industry it's like, well, what is it about you that's different than everybody else? Let's look at that, and let's highlight that, and let's celebrate that. And it's very freeing in that sense because you don't feel like you have to fit into a box as much. I remember like I was still transitioning between like public health and acting, and I was like in between, and I was doing interviews for a public health job at the same time as I was like taking meetings for acting related stuff. And like the stuff that I would like bring into the acting related interviews were always like, these are the things that make me quirky and different. I have an Ebola virus tattoo. People would be like, oh cool, great, yeah, amazing, wow, Ebola virus, tell us about that, you know? And then like I go to like my interview for my public health job, like, I have an Ebola virus tattoo. And it was like, the wires were getting crossed and people were like, yeah, that's too much information. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry, I don't, anyway, I really love infectious diseases, so. So, yeah, that's the beauty.
All right, we're calling it. Yeah, it's the same like you're saying, you know, if you were to give given a line, you talked about like one line to read, and it's just one line, you know, and you can do it like a vanilla sort of way, read that one line. I don't know, what's an example of a line? You know, it was a dark and stormy night. You just say, it was a dark and stormy night. Okay, thank you. But if you came in and you're like, it was a dark and stormy night. When you put something interesting into the dark and stormy night. Yes. I remember. You know, if you put something on it, I don't know, make it unique or be quirky. That's the one you're going to go, oh, that's kind of different. You took a breath there. I don't make it human. You know, it says, ba, 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 thank you. And if you take a second and create something, that's the fun. Because I don't know, does that make any sense? Totally. You know? Yeah, just be unique, be you. Don't be anybody else. Don't try to be anyone else. That's
how William Shatner got cast in the first place.
That's right. Yeah,
it was start.
Yeah, it's good thing.
It was start.
I was on the radio at 17 or 18 years old, and I was a big fan of David Letterman, and I was doing his top 10, you know, and I was mimicking him. And then somebody called after midnight, you know, hi, CFT, you're on the air. Stop doing Letterman! Oh, and they hang up on me. And I think back to that, and he was right. Stop doing someone else, do you. And it took 40 years to get to that point.
You want good advice as far as how to submit yourself. Stop doing everybody.
Yeah.
But if you want to start doing a mishmash of people that you sound like, bad impressions lead to fresh new voices. Take 2 or 3 that you sound similar to, mix them together. Don't do spot-on voices that are already out there. Mix them together and come up with something that's not already at the party. That's how you get invited to the party.
All right. Do we have a man with a microphone in the audience? There he is. Would anybody like to ask a question for these guys? Here we go.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you for this panel. It is really helpful because my younger brother is doing his own animation YouTube thing, and he's asked me to do some voice acting, so this is really helpful.
Great.
So the actual question is more, has there been an instance where you've gone into a recording session and you've ended up over the course of the session feeling different by the end of it? So I mean, you go in feeling okay, but you're supposed to be playing your character as like crying, and by the end of it, you're pretty much genuinely trying not to cry.
I've had that. I do dubbing. I mean, I haven't done it in a while, but I've done like Netflix series dubbing, and I've definitely had you know, if the character is crying, I've been able to get myself to a place where I was also like crying. And it's fine, you know, you do it and then like wipe the tears and then get it together and then, you know, move on to the next thing. But yeah, that can happen.
It happens more earlier in your career when you're kind of in a different headspace. It becomes more work as you become more skilled at it and giving it the keeping it in the compartment you wanted it. But when I was in college, my college was part of a repertory company, and the acting faculty of the school was the resident acting company of the repertory company. So they were subject to our criticism at night, and we were subject to their criticism during the acting classes in the day. It's a really amazing setup. But I got invited into a production of Murat Saad, which takes place in an insane asylum, and I was one of the crazies. And I was more vulnerable mentally in those days. So 8 shows a week, I was insane and locked up on stage. And I couldn't let it go. And I would have dreams at night that I was in the show on stage, in my dreams. And as soon as I got off stage, at the end of the show in my dream, they would say 5 minutes, and I would have to go back into the show in my dream on stage. So that was not pleasant. But you can get emotionally invested in something, and then you just figure out how to detach yourself. But yes, it can stick to you. It's important to not let it stick to you.
I think we have another one. This young lady down the front here.
Hi. Hi everyone. So my question is, when the pandemic happened and you had to go to home recording, how did you adjust to that? Because I'm a voice actor, I predominantly work from home because I don't always have access to a studio. You know, my home setup is just a bunch of stuff thrown together for the moment. But did you find it sort of easy to work from home at first? Or did you think, oh no, this isn't as good as recording in an actual studio somewhere?
Well, for me, I was set up for COVID since the 90s. I always had a studio, pro setup, and was always ready to roll. So it wasn't just a quick cycle. Before, when we were doing He-Man, Masters of the Universe show, we had to go home. So Roger, Craig Smith, and I would be texting back and forth because we're all on Zoom or meeting. I'm like, dude, what's up, you know? And we'd all be ready to go. And Greg Delisle and Tom Kennedy would be the last to log on. We're waiting. And Greg always logged on with a black screen. And Tom would log on, and his forehead would be in the thing.
Is this thing on? I can't, can you see me?
Tom, you can see him. Turn your, Tom, you can, and Greg says, I can't get this to work. And Roger texted me and says, isn't it amazing the 2 top people in voiceover don't have no idea how to work a computer? And so they finally, got it. But Roger and I had already, we have a similar sort of, we just sort of do all this stuff. And I was just ready to roll. I would gear for the car, gear for the hotel here as I bring along.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, well, I guess this is now what we're doing. But for some people, they have to scramble. They have to scramble.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think they were just adapting and modifying. But the same thing with people's foreheads in the Zoom and all that. It was more amusing than anything else, but we were all just making the best of a situation, neither bad nor good. Just we all have the ability to adapt, and it was being tested. We were getting on, keeping calm and carrying on.
Cool. If we're really quick, we can maybe do just one more. We've got this chap down here in the front, so this is going to be the last one, guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead, mate.
Hi there, love all the information you get. My question is this: when it comes to difficult kinds of roles, like say really gruff roles, things like that, what kind of tricks do you offer for certain voices, like high pitch, low pitch, etc.? Just want to know.
So when you're doing different kinds of voices, either higher pitch or when it has to go really low and gruff, what kind of techniques might you use to reach those?
You have to realize that well, first of all, it's character driven, it's not voice driven. But once you have figured out where your character is coming from, you're also going to add a level of placement.
So, Squeak the Mouse comes from right between my two eyes, and
my chest voice sits right here in the middle of my sternum.
my Squeak the Mouse voice comes right between my eyes, so they're not in conflict.
My growl voice goes all the way from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes. So if it's Halloween, who wants to travel? I go all the way from up here to down here, and then I have very intense moments down here. Cornfed pig has to take care of the pig, so I just think about the soles of my feet. These are placements. I'm moving where it's coming from. Eeyore is right in the middle of my feet, and it's coming straight up like a sounding chamber. Capitol Records used to bounce the sound through the basement and then back up. I visualize that when I'm doing it. It's a mental thing for me, but you're allowed to paint from a palette, and like a palette of colors, you have an infinite number of mixtures that you can do. But the more you're in touch with your own brain, the more that's how I do it. I visualize that palette of colors and placement. This is just because I'm a weird dude, and that's how I do it. Everybody's got their own technique, but that's what I do.
There's something I practice when they send me the audition and they have the breakdown of the character. I start, reading, and I fluctuate depending on what it says. If he's a wizard, okay, and he's English, and he's 70 years old, and that's what we're doing. How do I act so well? Sir Ian, are you shall not pass? Sir Ian. I just sort of follow directions and I come up with a voice based on that, and I play around until it feels like it's a character, and then I go in for the nuanced stuff and play around with Greg says, the ups and downs and things happen. It's a game with me. It's a fun game. I love to play as long as I can. That's just nothing like it.
Yeah, similar. There's also like a physicality that goes along. So if someone really small, and I kind of get really small, and it's just very tiny. And then if it's someone that's really angry and ready to go, then your body, your physicality changes. In terms of like actually, I have strained my voice before, especially I do a lot of video games now where I'm like a Marine, and there's a lot of shouting that happens. I have this thing called a voice straw. I don't know if you guys use the voice straw too.
Straw?
It's called a voice straw, and it's like literally it's a straw, but then there's like a cup at the end of it, and you hold it against your mouth, and you kind of like do a whole exercise where you blow into it, and it opens up your vocal cords, so that when you're saying, especially with the stuff if I'm yelling back to back to back to back with the Marine voice. You yell into this cup straw thing first, and then it opens up the chords so that then when I'm doing the lines, I'm not straining as much for as long, and I'm able to use my voice for longer. Yeah, it's a cool ditty.
So everybody get a voice straw. Guys, we're going to have to wrap it up there. So I hope that's given you a little bit of an insight into what it is to be a voice actor. Please give it up.